How do you make decisions? This question really matters because your decision-making determines what work you do, how much money you make, who you spend your time with, your health, and ultimately, your happiness. So in light of that, my goal today is to attempt to make you a better decision-maker for the rest of your life. But what to say about such a complex topic in so little time? Well, to try to answer that question, I categorized more than 90 different decision-making concepts, and one stood out to me because it is both so important, yet so commonly misunderstood: the role of intuition in decision-making. Now, it's easy to be a believer in intuition. It's especially easy if you've ever seen Magnus Carlsen play speed chess. He's the 28-year-old chess prodigy who's the world chess champion for 6 years. In 2015, he played an exhibition match where he competed against 3 other people simultaneously on 3 chessboards. His opponents were given 3 times the amount of time that he was. So whereas they had the luxury to ponder their moves, he had to make each move in mere seconds, relying almost entirely on intuition. Now, stories like this make intuition seem like magic, but it's not magic. Magnus's amazing chess intuition, like all intuition, has an explanation. So how does he do it? Well, to begin to answer that question, we have to dig into how the mind works. So we can think of the mind as having 2 parts. First of all, there's the subconscious, fast, effortless part, sometimes referred to as System 1. This is the part of the mind you're using if you're doing a simple math problem like 2 + 2, or if you try to imagine what an elephant would look like if it had wings. Notice how an answer just jumps into your mind. We can't directly observe the operations of this System 1 part of our mind. All we can see are its outputs, and the outputs tend to come in the form of images, predictions, and memories. Interestingly, some of these outputs are precisely what we refer to when we say intuition. Then there's the conscious, slow, effortful part of our mind, also known as System 2. This is the part that engages in reasoning and reflection. And it's the part of your mind that you're probably using when you're doing a more difficult math problem, like 59 times 47. Or if you're doing something else effortful, like trying to compare the features of 2 products at a store. Interestingly enough, this is probably the part of the mind that you identify as being you, because it's the part that we actually have conscious control over. It's worth noting, though, that System 1 and System 2 are simply representations of the mind. They are not referring to the anatomy of the brain. Corresponding to these 2 parts of the mind, there are 2 types of decision-making. There's intuitive decision-making, where we just rely on the subconscious part. That is, we just go with our gut. Then there's reflective decision-making, where we put the conscious mind in charge of the decision-making process. But this raises a really important question. When should we use intuitive decision-making, and when should we use reflective decision-making? Well, all you have to remember is fire. When a decision is fire, we should use intuitive decision-making. Otherwise, reflective decision-making is probably the better bet. So let's go through it. The F in FIRE stands for fast decisions. Imagine there's a car coming down the other lane of the highway, and it's just swerved into your lane. You have no choice but to use intuition before the car collides with you. If you try to reason about what to do, it would be too late. When a decision is fast, we have no choice but to make the decision based on intuition because reflection is simply too slow. The I in FIRE stands for irrelevant decisions. You shouldn't spend an hour trying to decide whether to put carrots in your salad or which of 2 hand soaps to buy. You should just go with your gut. When a decision is irrelevant, we should make the decision based on intuition, not reflection, because reflection will waste precious time and effort. Then the R in FIRE stands for repetitious decisions. Magnus's amazing chess intuition that we talked about before is not because intuition is magic, it's because he's making a repetitious decision. In other words, over many years, he's honed his ability by trying moves, finding what works, and getting feedback. A repetitious decision is precisely one where we've made many similar decisions like that one in the past before and gotten feedback on what worked. We can actually hone our ability over time through this feedback, and that's how we get better. But if Magnus were to try to apply his amazing chess intuition in a different domain, say the game of Go, he'd be far less effective. Finally, the E stands for evolutionary decisions, like should I eat this disgusting, bad-smelling slab of meat, or should I pet this animal? With evolutionary decisions, we don't need to learn to make them through experience, because evolutionary forces have actually programmed right into our genes certain survival-related decision-making skills. All right, so we've seen that if a decision is fire, we should use intuitive decision-making, where we just go with our gut. And if it's not fire, reflective decision-making is probably the better option. But don't be fooled. This might make you think that in reflective decision-making, we don't use intuition, which is totally false. So what is the role of intuition in reflective decision-making? Well, it actually plays 4 critical parts, at least. The first is in helping us brainstorm options. You can tap into your System 1 to generate more options for what you could do in the situation. And that's really important because people very often frame their decision as being just between 2 things. Should I quit my job or stay with it? But there might be other really important options, like maybe you can renegotiate your role with your boss, or maybe you can internally transfer at the same company. And the thing is, your decision can't be better than the best option you've considered. And that's why brainstorming options is so very important. The second way that our subconscious plays an important role in reflective decision-making is it helps us generate predictions. For instance, you can probably predict whether this car can get out of this parking spot without even thinking about it at all. Now, in games like chess, these kinds of intuitive predictions are really valuable, but they're really also very useful in many situations in life. For instance, you can predict how other people will behave, you can make predictions about what you will enjoy, or you can even predict what the consequences of different situations might be. So for example, imagine that in work you have a difficult conversation you need to have with your work colleagues. You could tap into your System 1 to start generating predictions about how different colleagues might behave in response to you framing the conversation in different ways. You can even learn to make your predictions better over time simply by trying to make many predictions in the domain and carefully tracking whether you're right or wrong. The third important role of intuition in reflective decision-making is that we can listen to our gut feelings to try to figure out how much we value different things. And in important decisions, this is really essential because very often there are multiple values at stake. For instance, imagine you're trying to decide whether to lie to a friend in order to protect them, or to tell them the truth even though you will know it will hurt them. You have to tap into your gut feelings to say, how much do I value honesty and authenticity versus how much do I value not hurting this person? And in our own research, we actually developed a new intrinsic values test that measures 22 categories of things that humans intrinsically value, ranging from happiness and truth to fairness and reputation. The better you understand your values, the easier it is to make decisions when those values come into conflict. The fourth role of intuition and reflective decision-making that I'll mention is that our subconscious will pop information into our minds that is relevant to our decision-making, often in the form of memories. So for instance, let's say you're trying to figure out why your back hurts. Maybe your subconscious will suddenly remind you that a coworker of yours mentioned that you slouch over your laptop, and then that can be really useful information that could help you solve your back problem. Or suppose you have a meeting that's coming up and you're feeling nervous, your subconscious might suddenly remind you about a deep breathing technique you used in the past that you found very helpful. But unfortunately, they're also prone to cognitive biases. Biases such as recency bias, where we tend to overweight recent information relative to other, maybe equally valid older information. Or the bandwagon effect, where we tend to overweight information that's gotten from other people just because other people believe it. During the reflective decision-making process, our subconscious mind will pop into our head ideas, predictions, feelings, and information. And we have to ask, are these good ideas? Are these accurate predictions? Is this really how I feel? And is this information biased? So it's absolutely essential that we make use of all this valuable stuff that's coming from our intuition, but also that we not be misled by it in the process. So putting this all together, we have 2 parts of the mind, the subconscious System 1 and the conscious System 2. These correspond to 2 types of decision-making. Intuitive decision-making, where we just rely on the subconscious, we go with our gut, and reflective decision-making, where we let our conscious mind be in charge of the process. If a decision is fire, that is fast, irrelevant, repetitious, or evolutionary, then we're probably better off using intuitive decision-making. Otherwise, reflective decision-making is probably better. But we've also seen that even during reflective decision-making, there are 4 really critical elements of the subconscious that get used in that process. Okay, but how does this make our life better? Well, if a decision is fire, it means you can use your intuition to solve that problem very comfortably without having to second-guess yourself, which can save you time and effort. On the other hand, if the decision is not fire, well, that means you know that you're supposed to use your reflective decision-making, which could save you from really bad outcomes that might result if you relied too much on intuition. Furthermore, we've seen some tricks of how you can use your intuition better to make reflective decision-making even better than it normally is. So how do you do that? Well, you can tap into your intuition to generate more options as a form of brainstorming. You can generate predictions of what would happen if you decided this versus decided that. You can tap into your gut feelings to understand your values, to really say what's at stake and how much do I care about the different things in stake. And finally, you can use your reflective mind as a check on your intuition to really make sure it's valid and not fall for biases. I'll leave you with a quote from Magnus Carlsen, world chess champion, showing how he blends intuition and reflection when he's not under time pressure. My intuition usually tells me something. It gives me an idea of what I want to play. I'll have plenty of time to verify that, to calculate it in different variations to see if I'm right. You can make better decisions if you learn how to use your intuition and blend it with your reflection.